Hello and welcome to Worldview. This is a program designed to bring you up to speed with trending developments the world over. My name is Xavier Robert, reaching you live from Uyo, the Akwa State capital. And on our top stories today, Hamas-run health ministry says more than 700 Palestinians killed by Israeli airstrikes in Gaza Strip over the past 24 hours. Republicans pick Congressman Mike Johnson as their latest nominee for Speaker of House of Representatives. Japan's top court rules that legal clause requiring people to undergo sterilization surgery if they want to legally change their gender is unconstitutional. Details of these stories now in a moment. First in Worldview today, Israel will refuse visa to United Nations officials, according to its ambassador to the UN, as the country's chief speech at the Security Council the previous day continues. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres indirectly criticized Israel for ordering the evacuation of civilians from the north to the south of the Gaza Strip. He also said Hamas's attack on Israel on October 7 did not happen in a vacuum, as the Palestinians have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. Now, many countries are to have welcomed Guterres' reportedly very balanced approach. However, Israel was furious, and its officials called on the UN chief to resign. Israeli Foreign Minister Eli Cohen, who was at the debate, was said to be upset, according to Elondo, that he had cancelled a meeting with the Secretary General that was supposed to happen Tuesday afternoon. Away from that, now, more than 700 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli airstrikes in the Gaza Strip over the past 24 hours, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Israel military said it struck 400 terror targets and killed several Hamas commanders over the same period. It also declared that it would not reduce its attacks despite Hamas's release of another 2 hostages. UN aid agencies, meanwhile, pleaded for sustained and safe humanitarian access, warning they were on their knees. Now, a third of hospitals in Gaza are no longer functioning due to the shortages of electricity, medicine, and staff, and the shortage of clean water, which is now critical. Israel launched its bombing campaign against Hamas, which Israel, the UK, said, and US and other powers class as a terrorist organization in response to an unprecedented cross-border attack on 7th October, in which at least 1,400 people were said to have been killed and 222 others were taken hostage. Nearly 5,800 people have been killed in Gaza since then, according to the health ministry. Open debate on the Israel-Gaza war, with most members calling for an immediate ceasefire to allow humanitarian aid to reach Palestinians on the council, which would have called for a pause in fighting because it did not do enough to stress Israel's right to self-defense. An earlier Russian drafted resolution was also rejected. Nearly 9 countries were on the speaker's list for Tuesday's debate, including about 30 foreign ministers and deputy ministers, with many echoing calls for a ceasefire and a halt to attacks on Palestinian civilians amid widespread destruction in Gaza and the mounting death toll. In a separate development now, Republicans have picked Congressman Mike Johnson as the latest nominee for the Speaker of the House of Representatives. The House Republican Conference chairwoman, Elise Stefanik, made the announcement after the 3 rounds of voting. Reports say Johnson is the 4th nominee put forward after 3 others failed to win enough support from colleagues, and the 2nd nominee of the day. Recall that the House has been without a speaker and has been unable to pass bills since Kevin McCarthy was ousted on October 3. Acapulco resort. The NHC, while stating that the storm's winds are forecast to reach 165 miles per hour, warned of destructive waves and heavy flooding in coastal areas including Acapulco. While Mexican President Andrés Obrador urged Mexican citizens to move to emergency shelters away from rivers, streams, and ravines. Now, hundreds of residents of the Moroccan town of Amizmiz have reported located 34 miles south of Marrakesh was one of the hardest hit by the September 8 earthquake. The earthquake was the worst to strike Morocco in more than 60 years, killing nearly 3,000 people and leaving thousands more injured and homeless. Even that, Japan's top court ruled that a legal clause requiring people to undergo sterilization surgery if they want to legally change their gender is unconstitutional. Several international organizations, including the European Court of Human Rights, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, and agreed on a separate clause requiring that the genital organs of people who want to change their gender resemble those of the opposite gender was met with disappointment. Some lawmakers and women's groups in Japan had said a ruling that challenges the existing law would sow confusion and undermine women's rights. The Supreme Court threw out a similar bid to scrap the sterilization requirement in 2019. Human Rights Watch said Wednesday's ruling meant the government now had to follow up. The Deputy Chief Cabinet Secretary Hiroshi Moriya told a regular press conference that the government will examine the decision closely and respond appropriately. The Japanese law states that people who want to change gender must present a diagnosis of gender dysphoria and meet 5 requirements. Those requirements are being at least 18 years old, not being married, not having underage children, having genital organs that resemble those of the opposite gender, and having no reproductive glands or ones that have permanently lost their function. The plaintiff's lawyers, Kazuki Minami and Masafumi Yoshida, argued that the last 2 requirements violated their client's constitutional right to pursue happiness and leave without discrimination, and posed significant physical pain and financial burden to transgender people. In a separate development, Pope Francis has endorsed a Polish tech entrepreneur's global project aimed at getting more children into computer programming. Miron Mironiuk, founder of artificial intelligence company Cosmos AI, is drawing on his own experience of coding transforming his life. He said the code with Pope initiative would bridge the glaring disparities in education across the globe. The initiative will champion access to coding education through a free online learning platform for students aged 11 through 15 across Europe, Africa, and Latin America. After 60 hours of dedicated learning, children will be equipped with the basics of Python, one of the world's most popular coding languages. Moving on now, China has removed Defense Minister Li Shangfu and ousted ex-foreign and Li President Xi Jinping. The announcement did not offer up reasons for the minister's fall from grace. No replacement for Li as defense minister was, however, announced. Now, previously, it had been reported that the U.S. government believed Li was under investigation and had been stripped of his ministerial duties, but China President Alexander Lukashenko in Minsk. A separate development, Hurricane Otis has made landfall on the coast of southern Mexico, bringing wind speeds of up to 165 mph. It touched down near the popular Acapulco resort just after midnight on Wednesday. The National Hurricane Center at the Princess Mondo Imperial Resort in Acapulco for a work conference hours before Otis made landfall. Told the media that the building had been damaged by the wind and rain. He also said the hotel room windows buckled from the force of the winds and smashed soaking items out of the room. Now, from Acapulco, the building shivered as if an earthquake was happening. He and hundreds of other guests at the hotel have been hunkering down together while the worst of the hurricane passed. Elsewhere, Russian lawmakers have approved of this war in Ukraine. The Upper House Federation Council unanimously approved a bill to abandon the landmark agreement outlawing nuclear weapons tests. Now, the lower house State Duma passed it an accelerated vote last week. The legislation now only needs the signature of President Vladimir Putin to come into effect. Moscow announced on October 6 its intention to withdraw from the treaty to mirror the position of the United States, which has itself signed but never ratified the treaty. It isn't clear, however, whether the revocation will result in Russia resuming tests of nuclear. However, he noted that the U.S. conducted a chemical explosion at its test site in Nevada. While Washington said the test would help it detect low-yield nuclear explosions, Ryabkov told the Federation Council that the blast was undoubtedly a political signal. After the break, workers at South African mine begin to resurface after being held underground for 3 days in what police are calling a hostage situation. Stay with us for details on this and more right after the break. Many thanks for staying tuned. Now, King Charles III and Queen Camilla has met with members of the UK's Kenyan diaspora during a reception at Buckingham Palace. Reports say the royal couple will also visit the East African nation from October 31 through November 3. After reports, Kenyan President William Ruto invited the royal couple for the visit, which comes as the African nation prepares to celebrate 60 years of independence from Britain in December. The program will reflect the two countries' desires to work together on a range of issues, which include boosting youth opportunity and employment, advancing sustainable development, and creating a more stable, secure region. Moving on now, workers of South African mine have begun to resurface after being held underground for 3 days in what police are calling a hostage situation. Reports say hostage takers armed with weapons like clubs and mining tools had held more than 500 miners at the Gold 1 mine, according to the police. The miners were trapped amid a dispute between two trade unions. The National Union of Mine Workers, NUM, said Hollins had held its members against their will. The rival Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union, AMCU, denied it had trapped workers at the mine located near Johannesburg. AMCU insisted the miners were there willingly and were staging a sit-in protest. In a separate development, a Kenyan soldier attached to the East African Force in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo has been reportedly killed following an ambush by rebels. DR Congo spokesman Patrick Muyaya told newsmen that the soldier had died during clashes between the regional forces and M23 rebels in Kibumba area. It is the first death reported among the Kenyan troops since they joined the force last year. A statement from the DR Congo army condemned the killing, blaming it on the M23. It said the rebels fired a mortar now in a ship was responsible for damaging a Baltic Sea gas pipeline early this month. Police previously said the October 8 rupture to the subsea Baltic connector pipeline, as well as two telecoms cables, was caused by external mechanical force and were investigating whether this was a case of sabotage or caused by accident. On Tuesday, Finland's National Bureau of Investigation (NBI) said they had now retrieved a lost anchor from the seabed location, and its data pointed to the Hong Kong-flagged cargo vessel New Polar Bear as the culprit. Finnish investigators said they have tried contacting the ship's captain to no avail and are now cooperating with Chinese officials on the case. China is willing to provide all necessary information on the case in accordance with international law, the Chinese Foreign Ministry stated on Wednesday. Whether the pipeline damage was intentional or unintentional or caused by bad seafaring is the subject of the next phase in the probe. Officials said Beijing has denied any role in the incident and called for an objective, fair, and professional investigation. When the world's third-largest democracy will hold simultaneous presidential and parliamentary elections, Prabowo, aged 72, and Gibran Rakebuming Raka, aged 36, were joined by a marching band. They traveled to the General Elections Commission in Jakarta. Now, Prabowo, who is contesting the presidency for the third time after losing in 2014 and 2019 to Widodo, popularly known as Jokowi, asked for blessing from all Indonesians, saying the country now faces a very important point in its history. The duo were met by thousands of cheering supporters as they handed their credentials and manifesto to election officials. Let's move on now. Hong Kong leader John Lee has said the Chinese territory will table its own national security law in 2024, 4 years after Beijing imposed sweeping legislation that critics say has decimated freedoms. The Chinese law was brought in after hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets in protests that began over an extradition deal with the mainland and developed into demands for more democracy and political freedom that sometimes turned violent. The broadly worded Beijing law bypassed the local legislature and made acts deemed to be secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces punishable with sentences as long as life in prison. Making his second annual policy speech, he said some countries were still trying to undermine Hong Kong. He did not go into detail. In a separate development, a Pakistani court has granted bail to three-time former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in 2 corruption cases. Sharif was convicted in the 2 cases after his removal as Prime Minister in 2017. The Islamabad High Court on Tuesday gave Sharif bail until Thursday, and prosecutors did not object, trusting he would turn up for the trial. Sharif's lawyer Azam Nazir Tra said. Sharif returned to Pakistan last week after 4 years of self-imposed exile in London in a bid to stand in this year's elections against his biggest rival, former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Sharif had not set foot in Pakistan since 2019, when he traveled to the United Kingdom's capital for medical treatment while doing a 14-year prison sentence for corruption. Earlier, his bail in the separate case was confirmed by a corruption court in Islamabad. With that, we wrap up our package for you on Worldview today. Do ensure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website, SpectrumTVLive.ng. My name is Sayer Roberts, reaching you live from Rio, the capital city of Akwa Ibom, and you have been watching Worldview on Spectrum TV. Do enjoy the rest of the day. Bye for now.